Well, hello, and welcome back to The Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
I'm Emily.
And this is a podcast where we journey chapter by chapter through C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. This is Chapter 8 of The Magician's Nephew, What Happened at the Front Door. Well, welcome back to the show, Emily.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're glad you could join us.
We are having, this matters to absolutely no one, but I feel like we should at least acknowledge it. Emily and I are here. As Emily, you're returning champion to the show, obviously. You've been on the Patreon, as the kids call it these days, once or twice, and then we were on the regular show back in season 1. The last time you and I recorded together in person, we were in a closet in my old house because that first season, that's where Phil and I never recorded in person. We had actually never met in person before season 1.
No, that's not true.
But now here we are. Emily and I are actually at the beach on the family beach vacation, and Phil is at home.
Wish you were here,
on vacation.
Phil.
And yeah,
Not on vacation. Although
I got a little bit of a tour, and I'm very jealous now. That looks like a sweet place.
Yeah. We were going to try to record on the front porch, and it was fine when I practiced with the mics earlier, and then it's gotten windier since then. I was like, no, nobody wants to hear that. Maybe like a gentle wave in the background, I don't think would have minded a lot of people. That's not how you say that, but whatever. I don't think a lot of people would have been upset about it, but the whole like in the
wind
background,
is a little much.
That would have been a little too much. I wonder how that came through on the mic, me just blowing into it like that.
Well, these are pretty good mics, so hopefully it didn't come through at all.
Yeah.
We had a beautiful view.
We did.
And now we have the view of our grandmother's bedroom.
Now we're staring at the wall. This is how it works. So, Phil, you are, though, we don't want you to feel too left out. You're about to go, and I can say this because you'll have already returned by the time this episode airs. You're about to go to Portugal and Spain, so I don't feel too bad for you.
That's right. This is a combination of wanting to travel for the past 7 years, but never having the right combination of salary plus paid time off. But I finally have it.
Didn't you go to Mexico?
I went to Mexico City, but that was more of a mission trip type thing, and
That's fair.
that to me was not far enough. I've never been off of the continent, I feel like.
So why Spain and Portugal?
We have some friends in Spain that we're going to go see, and they're going to be in Portugal for a conference. So we're all going to meet there and then share a plane back to where they are.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
You've met my friends Jesse, or our friends, I should say, Jesse and Andrew, I think.
I think they were in your wedding, or one of them was in your wedding.
Andrew was not at the wedding. Jesse was at the wedding. This is
okay.
awkward. If they ever listen, we're like, no, they weren't in the wedding. They were just at the wedding.
Sorry.
I wasn't invited, and that's really awkward.
Phil wasn't even at the wedding. So yeah, they live in Granada.
And we're co-host.
And Emily just got back from Greece.
We did. We went to Greece. I'm part of this organization.
She went to Broadway. That's all she means.
If there's any educators out there, I'm part of this group called Book Bag Tours, and you travel internationally with a whole bunch of other teachers and kind of get to see what their school system's like.
Ooh,
Say we went to Greece.
Wait, I actually didn't know you were doing that in Greece, though. I thought that was just when you were in Ireland and those other places you've been to.
Same organization with Greece, yeah.
So did you visit a school
So
there?
their schools are not in session, but we met with Greek educators. So we didn't go into the school, but we met with Greek educators to kind of talk about their
Interesting.
their school
I don't think
system.
I missed that part.
Yeah. But then we did
And
a lot of sightseeing.
And a lot of the things that Daniel teaches were originally written in Greek.
Yeah. Well, Emily works at a classical school, too, so I think it very much is
A lot of columns and stuff.
That's actually all we teach in classical Christian
Just
education.
ancient
We
Greece,
just
that's it.
teach ancient Greece and
the types of columns.
Yeah. And because there's only 3, it's really repetitive after a while.
Our kids are really smart.
Which one's the one that hangs from the ceiling? Is that stalactite?
Yeah, that's the. So I know that you're being facetious, but the way I always remembered that, and the way I taught it when I used to teach that back when I was teaching 4th grade, is stalactites hang tight to the ceiling so they don't fall off, and stalagmites might reach the ceiling if they grow tall enough. And so I used to teach that one.
It's a good trick.
I don't have a cool little saying though for Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns. So. All right, well, this is enough column talk here. We're here to talk about the beginning of Narnia today. Emily has been invited on for a really special episode here, one that we're really excited about, one where we see our protagonists as well as some antagonists end up in Narnia as it is being born. And I hope that's not too much of a spoiler for you, Phil. It's never actually named in this chapter, but it feels relatively clear that this is Narnia when you see Aslan there.
Yeah, believe it or not, after 5.5 seasons of doing this show, I do pick up on subtle little things like that. I figured that might be what's happening.
Subtle little things like the lion.
Yes.
I figured. Yeah, obviously, I knew that you would know that, so I thought will talk a little bit about the creation of Narnia today, although some of it we'll save for our next episode too, because obviously it's not over yet. So, Phil, it's an even chapter, so you have the summary. Would you like to go ahead and get us started here?
Sure. Chapter 8. After being embarrassed by the crowd, the witch snaps off one of the crossbars from a nearby lamppost and begins beating the policeman and those around him. At the same time, Diggory makes several attempts to grab the witch and teleport her away. He finally succeeds, but ends up bringing along Polly, his uncle, the cabbie, and Strawberry the horse into the wood. When Strawberry takes a drink of water, they all find themselves teleported again, but this time in a strange, dark void. After a while, the group hears a low, beautiful sound. Everyone is enamored with the music except for Uncle Andrew and the witch, both of whom cannot stand it. An incredible sunrise begins, and mountains appear, along with hills, a river, and finally, a lion. Diggory and Polly are about to depart by grabbing a ring when suddenly the song begins to change.
All right, well done. A lot happening. You had to cover quite a few things in just a short amount of words there.
Yeah, I wrote out so much, and then I was only a few pages in, and I thought, oh, we have the entire creation thing to cover here too.
So we actually start out with Jadis, with the witch, fighting. It's the chapter. Interestingly enough, it's called The Fight at the Lamppost, but the fight at the lamppost is over about half a page into the chapter. It feels like, right?
Yeah.
Does she bring the lamppost with her?
That's.
Sorry.
No, you're more than welcome to ask that, because I know that you have not read past the book either. So, I mean, and you have before.
Yeah, but it's been a really long time.
It's been a while.
And I didn't even put that together until he started reading the summary, and I thought, she probably has that in her hand.
So
and it comes with her.
She breaks off like the handle right here at the beginning of the chapter, which is inconsistent with Pauline Baines' illustration in the last chapter, where we actually see the lamppost there already missing that top iron bar. But that's okay. We've established many seasons ago that the paintings are beautiful, illustrations are beautiful, but not canonical.
You have to keep in mind the infrastructure in England at the time was pretty poor, and
So
a lot of those lampposts were broken.
They were already broken. So, but it says she breaks it off, and if we do remember, back in chapter 1, or maybe it's the very beginning of chapter 2 of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the lamppost in Narnia is missing one of those things. So right now, anyone who's read the other books before goes, I know what's going to happen here. Or at least, I'm not sure how we're going to get there, but this lamppost is clearly the lamppost, or somehow related to the lamppost we see at the beginning when Lucy
I have
enters.
a theory. And my
Tell us,
theory,
because I was going to ask you anyways.
My theory is that she plants it. She drops it, and it gets buried, and it grows a new lamppost.
She plants it accidentally or on purpose?
Well, she may intentionally drop it, but she accidentally plants it.
Interesting. Where's this theory coming from? Any particular idea behind this, or I'm just throwing everything up against the wall? This is what I think might happen.
It is just what popped in my head when I was thinking about the fact that there's an entire lamppost later on, but she only is carrying a piece of it, because it says she only broke off one of the things.
And she breaks off this bar. She's hitting the policeman on the head with it.
Yep.
I mean, is this a serious head injury? You're married to a doctor. What do you think?
Yeah, it could be a very serious head injury. Do a concussion
I
protocol
guess it doesn't take a
something.
doctor to let you know that getting hit on the head with an iron bar is maybe a problem.
Yeah.
What now? I know that all of our listeners over across the pond are going to tell me this is wrong, and I'm telling you right now, I know this is wrong. But how funny would it be? And you lived in England for a while. You lived in Cambridge, the not alma mater of C.S. Lewis, but the former workplace of C.S. Lewis. wouldn't it be kind of funny if she was? I kind of had imagined in my head that it's the Buckingham Palace guards with the big hats,
Right.
and it doesn't hurt them because they got the big fluffy black hats.
Right.
They're like, hey, bring it on, can't hurt us.
Right.
Well, they
That's
don't
not
move
even my
either,
real
so
head.
they
Oh,
just
that's
stand
true.
there and
Yeah,
take
that's
it.
true. When they were having those really hot days in England, I feel like the picture seen around the Western world was those like people bringing those. What are they called?
The people that guard Buckingham
Yeah,
Palace.
is there a name besides people who
I've
guard
always called
Buckingham
them people
Palace?
who guard Buckingham Palace.
Okay, fair
Is it
enough.
the
Have you been there?
Nutcrackers?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what it
it.
is. Yeah, so the Nutcrackers, they're there, and they were giving those people water and stuff.
That's good.
Yeah, but it was
That's
just
really
weird
nice.
because like it was so hot, they like kind of broke, I think, like the main rule that they have, which you're not supposed to do that. But here they are, they did
Should
it.
have just let them die.
So as this is happening, and the witch is hitting these, I think she hits two policemen on the head. She gets angry because she realized what's happening with the crowd.
They're all making fun of her.
They all find it funny, and I guess this kind of makes sense because everything she's saying is so outlandish that it mostly just seems like maybe this person is broken out of bedlam and is there,
She's probably dressed weird.
Exactly. All we know as readers, this is not a person to be trifled with. She just killed an entire civilization, but everyone else just thinks it's hilarious.
Right. They have no reason to think otherwise.
And that really bothers her. And she says something really interesting that made me pause. One of the things that Jada says here, she says, "Scum, you will pay dearly for this when I have conquered your world. Not one stone of your city will be left. I will make it as Charn, as Felinda, as Soloris, as Brandamen." Which is confusing because she names 3 other worlds that we have never heard of in Narnia. And it's unclear to me, are these worlds that she also ended? She loops them in with Charn. She's like, Charn and then these 3 other places. So has she also ended life in these other places? Or are they just, everybody knows that those were places that also had their civilizations or worlds destroyed?
There's only one thing to do. Wait for the cinematic universe to come out, and then wait for the direct-to-streaming series about all 3 of those worlds.
You think it'll be there? It's in the big, what do they call those, show Bibles, right?
Yeah.
I feel like in her personality, though, she wouldn't mention something that wasn't like a bragging right for her.
Oh, that's true.
Like, why would I mention cities being destroyed if I didn't have?
So you're saying,
the
no,
upper
she
hand
did
in
all
it?
these. This is like
Yeah,
Charn was
I'd buy it.
the
Yeah.
4th world that she destroyed.
I
That
believe
like
it.
it's such a throwaway line by Lewis there, and yet it kind of gives you like, oh my gosh, Charn wasn't even the first time. Now we know that she's from Charn, so that brings some more questions because that's where her sister was. But like, is this? We have no idea about her lifespan. We have no idea how old she is as readers, and so maybe this is part of just a very long kind of, hey, I've just really done a number on a couple of different worlds here. Is that what you were thinking, Phil?
I was wondering why she doesn't leave any stones there. What does that do? And it's terrifying when she wipes
When
out
she
all
leaves
the
things
people.
behind, like the lamppost, it grows. So she has to make sure she doesn't leave anything.
I
Gotta
think it's
pulverize this.
I think it's more of a reminder that nothing you have built, every single thing built by man, will be gone. Like, I will leave nothing but rubble.
Yeah.
So,
Which includes stones.
fair enough.
I'm just saying.
So you should talk to her. You should. I don't know if she'd find that very funny though. So
I
she
think I'd be
says,
terrified.
as she's saying on this, someone who is terrified but is being courageous regardless of his own terror is Diggory, who catches her by the ankle. At this point, Polly has also showed up. She runs down as soon as she's ungrounded from her room. Diggory runs down. He gets kicked pretty badly in the face, not once but 2 different times, trying to grab Jadis. And a lot of different stuff unfolds where Uncle Andrew's saying, hey, calm down. You're making a fool of yourself. But again, he says it like a coward. So he doesn't really say it. He kind of beats around the bush. But in all of this chaos, what really keeps happening, or what eventually happens, is, as you mentioned, Phil, Diggory, Polly, Jadis, Uncle Andrew, Strawberry, and the cabbie, of all people, all are transported to the wood between the worlds. What do we make of this company?
I love that the horse came
Yeah?
and that the horse's name is Strawberry.
It's the best animal name we've ever come across in Narnia.
Yeah, and it's what an incredible transition too. This is one long paragraph, and in the middle, they all find themselves in darkness, and you just hear Uncle Andrew wailing, and he thinks that he's died, and he feels very bad about the life that he's chosen.
Which is interesting because he even talks, he's like, this is not good for my health. It's all my godmother's fault. I mean, very much lines up with who this character has already shown us to, who Lewis has shown this character to be, which is someone who doesn't own up to any of his actions. He's extremely, negligent as a magician and as just an adult, right? But he never owns up to his own mistakes. It's always someone else's fault. He kind of has that mentality of I'm never wrong and I am so powerful and I'm the most important. But the second things don't go my way is, actually, I'm not in charge. It's not me. Like he wants to have that power except when it actually means something.
Right.
As they get to the wood between the worlds, Phil, this brings us back. Now, Emily has not heard this discussion because we recorded these obviously in advance. Phil and I talked about the last time that they were in the wood between the worlds. We argued a little bit about whether Jadis was completely faking it or really had lost her power. We do find out she actually is weak in this place.
Right.
So it does bring us back to this last question we had an episode or two ago. Why does this place do this to her? What about the wood between the worlds makes her so powerless?
I think there are no people to pull energy from. Maybe she's an extrovert.
I mean, I think that phrase between worlds, maybe who you are and the powers that you have exist in one world, but then can't extend into the multiverse. That
is true. You're right, because she's not as she's still strong in our world, but she can't do like her little abracadabra thing. Remember when she tries this to the last chapter when she's in the doorway with Aunt Letty, she's not able to do all the different powers she wants to do. So I guess that is true. I wonder if I like what she said too. I wonder if there is this sense of you're kind of the person you are at your very core, right, is who you are in the wood between the worlds. And maybe it's because she really is such a hollow, horrible person that's almost revealed in this place. And that's where, like you said, without any of that, kind of combine both of what you're saying, without Phil saying, without other people to kind of draw on or oppress, she doesn't have that same power. And it's this in-between place where she's kind of diminished to her very being, which is kind of an evil person.
Yeah. I mean, where do we think she draws her power from in the other world?
I mean, it's very unclear.
It's not solar.
Yeah, does she draw on the power of helplessness? I think of when it's, always winter. Does she draw on, the hopelessness of other people? And then when she's now gone into this, this place between the worlds, we don't have as much hopelessness anymore. And so she's got less to draw upon.
When we think about, I'm trying to put this through kind of a perspective that Lewis might have, and we're going to talk about Tolkien quite a bit later on in this chapter, but thinking about how kind of all power comes from, in the Legendarium, from Eru Ilúvatar as kind of the one creator, the ultimate deity. We kind of assume that for Narnia, that's the Emperor beyond the sea, right, who sends Aslan. And if we're to make this a supposal, then Aslan himself is probably part of that trinity, if there is supposedly a trinity in the world of Narnia. And so all power would still have to come, or at least be granted, by that supreme being, in the same way that in our world, all power and sovereignty does belong to God. Now, there are bad and evil things in this world, but it is, and I want to save some of this for the next chapter, actually, because I do want to talk a little bit about making some comparisons to Melkor in the Ainulindale, back in Tolkien's Legendarium. But I do wonder if it's not as if she, I wonder we don't get more of her origin. Like, I really do wish we could know a little bit more about how she came to be in power in Charm. We never get any of that. She just is evil. Again, Lewis, we've said this all the time. Lewis is not concerned with that. That's not why he's doing this, but it does make us wonder.
To me, it's wonderful to have some backstory. It's fun to see this earlier version of Jadis, but I also think some of the power is the mystery. The characters don't get to know where she came from, and a lot of the time that I've found out someone's origin, it kind of takes away from the power they seem to have. Right? Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially in kind of postmodern storytelling, everyone has to be, a tragic bad guy, right? You can't just be pure evil, which is what the witch is. There's no empathy for her, or no, maybe empathy, but there's no sympathy for her. She's just bad. We don't get to, like her childhood was really rough. And there's a time and place for some of those stories. Don't get me wrong, but she's just pure evil and bad. And so really any origin story is just going to remind us that she's pure evil and bad. And so like you said, it's not something we necessarily need, actually.
Right.
But going back to the wood here, I actually had to read this. I don't know about y'all. I had to read this 2 or 3 times because what happens in the wood is so quick and so convoluted, where all of these people end up touching each other while Strawberry goes to get water and they all end up in the pool. Was this hard for any of y'all to follow?
It was hard to write in the summary just because if you blink, it's gone. And you're back in another place.
And why is Strawberry the one that seems to be at peace and very calm when they arrive? What is it? I forget where it says it, but it's like, everybody's kind of freaking out except for Strawberry because he's giving cheerful whinnies and like his ears are poking back forward.
Yeah.
And then he just goes to get a drink.
I was thinking about this too, and then I recalled back to the 3rd chapter of the book where Diggory and Polly first show up, and they are both really docile here. I mean, they're really sleepy. They become almost lethargic, although that sounds a little too negative for what's happening here. And they're very just satisfied in this place. And it seems like maybe that's happening to Strawberry, where all the stress and everything else has kind of helped Strawberry calm down. But that same kind of serenity has not made it to the children this time because they know they're in danger with the witch being there. The cabbie's got to be like, what the heck is going on? And then, of course, Andrew's terrified of everything, and Jadis herself is weak. So I kind of think that maybe Strawberry's the only one that's having the normal reaction because he's unaware of the true danger that they're all in, maybe.
Yeah. He's just kind of having a natural response.
Yeah. He's like, I'm thirsty.
Yeah. Maybe he'll learn to talk in Narnia, and then we can find out.
Maybe. I can't say anything else. Who knows?
Everybody's exchanging knowing looks. I feel like I'm close.
Well, let's move on because we're actually going to enter into kind of Narnia. The entire company of heroes and villains all together, and the cabbie. It's unclear where he stands at this point. He's just there. Although I feel we will get to know him a little bit better eventually. They all of a sudden wake up or open their eyes or find themselves, maybe is the best way to say it, in an abyss, in a void, in absolutely nothing. Did you see this coming at all, Phil?
Oh, this happens to me all the time. But
Please go on.
I sleep with a mask on.
So you know what it's like to open your eyes and see nothing.
I know what it's like to gain consciousness, but to see nothing.
So do you actually sleep with the mask on, or was this just a joke?
No, I really do. Yeah, I
you really do?
joke about the mask, yeah.
So you totally don't. I'm going to text Sarah Jane and be like, hey, does Phil actually sleep? Because it's one of those things where I think I'd be into sleeping with a mask on. I've never tried it because we have the blackout curtains, so I don't really need it in my bedroom. But if I didn't have blackout curtains, I think I'd have to put a mask on or something. I can't sleep when it's light out.
I've been surprised how much it helps. I even upgraded. I paid an extra $5 and got one that has this memory foam pad all the way around the face. So
you really weren't joking. This is a real thing.
I'm not joking.
And the other times that we have been we've gone away for a week or something like that, I guess I don't like look at you when you're in your
You're
bed. So
sleeping.
you know what I mean? Like
I'm there when you wake up.
I don't.
No, he was there when I woke up. He was standing over the bed. Oh, good, you're up. Like it's 5:30 in the morning.
Let's play.
I was thinking about the most recent time we were all in the mountains last fall. I was like, I didn't walk
this
into
is
your and
a-
Sarah's room to be like, what
Oh, yeah.
what mask has everybody got on tonight?
No, this is a relatively recent thing, but I think I did have it when we went on that trip.
Yeah. Does Sarah also wear a mask? Is she okay if you share her business on the show?
She's fine with it. She does not wear a mask. And this is another thing. Speaking of sunrises, I have an alarm clock that mimics the sunrise, but I can't see
Sure.
it because I have a mask on, and it drives me crazy.
Why do you have both? Don't you only need one?
Well, I bought them at different times. I
fair
kept
enough.
using the sunrise thing until we arrived at a compromise where I don't use that alarm anymore.
Okay, fair enough. I mentioned this. I feel like either you and I talked about this before recording or it actually made its way into an episode, but I also recently got a sunrise alarm and I love it.
Yes.
And Anna hates it. It really doesn't. Yeah, I love it. I think it's a really great way to wake up, but I guess there's a lot of people who are like, I do not want to wake up that way. Give me the screeching alarm from my iPhone. That's how I want to wake up.
Yeah, I would be curious if anyone actually has both people in the room that like that alarm, because it seems to be pretty polarizing.
Do you and Jeff have one?
No.
No, y'all don't
I just
have
have the normal little ding that the iPhone gives.
The iPhone
I don't
gives,
know.
yeah.
Honestly, I usually wake up before the alarm goes off.
Oh, you're so much better than me. I do not do that. Well, I think that's enough. This is a great segue for us because we're talking about waking up, and here we are as Narnia is waking up. But before that happens, everyone is very upset, or at least pretty scared, except the cabbie, who kind of has accepted his death. He's lived a good life, and so what does he have them do?
We're going to sing a song.
We're gonna sing a little hymn.
Sing an M.
Yeah, an M, because we do get some of the way that he speaks. A little bit of
I
his
guess
accent
the H
comes
is
through.
silent in England.
Always.
What's interesting here is it's a song about Thanksgiving harvest, correct? I assume it's still religious in nature, but I guess it's possible that it might not be. But very interesting that right before we actually have Aslan sing a song, we have the cabbie here's response to the fear and just emptiness of this world being to just sing a song of thanksgiving. I think that's a very purposeful that Lewis has that, especially one of sustenance, right? A Thanksgiving harvest, kind of that idea of life, of giving. And it's after this hymn is over that we actually hear something else. And I'm going to read a little bit from the text. Here's what the narrator says. In the darkness, something was happening at last. A voice had begun to sing. It was very far away, and Diggory found it hard to decide from what direction it was coming. Sometimes it seemed to come from all directions at once. Sometimes he almost thought it was coming out of the earth beneath them. Its low notes were deep enough to be the voice of the earth herself. There were no words. There was hardly even a tune. But it was, beyond comparison, the most beautiful noise he had ever heard. It was so beautiful he could hardly bear it. The horse seemed to like it too. He gave the sort of whinny a horse would give if, after years of being a cab horse, it found itself back in the old field where it played as a foal, and saw someone whom it remembered and loved coming across the field to bring it a lump of sugar. And then Lewis writes this. Then two wonders happened at the same moment. One was that the voice was suddenly joined by other voices, more voices than you could possibly count. They were in harmony with it and far higher up the scale, cold, tingling, silvery voices. The second wonder was that the blackness overhead all at once was blazing with stars. They didn't come out gently by one, as they do on a summer evening. One moment there had been nothing but darkness. The next, 1,000 points of light leaped out. Single stars, constellations, and planets, brighter and bigger than any in our world. There were no clouds. The new stars and the new voices began at exactly the same time. If you have seen and heard it, as Diggory did, you would have felt quite certain that it was the stars themselves which were singing, and it was the first voice, the deep one, which had made them appear and made them sing. And this is the birth of Narnia.
I find it really interesting that you took out what the cabbie says when you were reading that.
I skipped over one line because I thought it kind of takes us out a little
Ain't
bit
it lovely?
of it. Did you, Phil, go ahead and read it.
I think Emily did a pretty good job. It's just
There you go.
I also love how it's
Go ahead.
the cabbie, and then they
Yes.
capitalize the C for cabbie.
It's his title.
Yeah.
You know, Lewis is very respectful of him.
It's just this incredible story of creation, and we're entranced by the song and what we're seeing, and all these lights are bursting out from nothingness, and in the middle of it all, the cabbie says, "Gawd," Gawd, ain't it lovely?
Which is, I think we could, and we are, we can laugh a little bit out at the way that this is kind of a interruption in the song that's being sung here. But it is kind of, there's no other response other than just wonderment, right? At the beauty of what's occurring here. It doesn't make any sense. It's overwhelmingly beautiful. We're seeing the creation of an entire world, just like, ain't it lovely? Nothing else we can do by that. And I love that it's the cabbie that says it too, and no one else. Again, the cabbie has no idea. He's the least in the know as to what is happening, but he does recognize beauty when he sees it.
Right.
When I'm interested in this horse. I'm really focused on the horse that we still get his reaction to. A very detailed reaction, I guess. Like the sort of whinny a horse would give if after years of being a cab horse, which that's what Strawberry had experienced.
Yeah, and it goes on just to say like what it really feels like. How interesting that Lewis does exactly choose to give that, those ideas, that kind of imaginative emotion through the eyes of the horse, not through, it's like if Diggory had experienced this. Like he could have said, it was as great as if Diggory experienced his mom not being sick anymore, or if, Polly experienced this or that. But no, this is what it's like for the horse. And there's that, I think, that very natural, primitive almost element of creation, of the horse just being in the setting it was created for.
And is he showing us that animals and creatures are going to be a huge important role in this world?
Oh, that's true too. That's well said. Well, there's a lot more that happens here, and we will come back to it, but we can't really go on without talking about the creation of Narnia through song. Phil, did you see this coming at all? Was this something you were already aware of? The idea that Aslan, who we found out later, is singing Narnia into existence?
No, I was very surprised by this in a good way. And I did something different for this chapter. I listened to the audiobook version first, and I think this is a great chapter to do that with, because the way it was described was just so fun to listen to. Now, there was one downside. At the very end of the chapter, you have the line, "All the time the voice went on singing," and then actual music starts, and you can't put actual music to a description like that and have it be amazing. And we have very few
All
classical
music will feel like a letdown. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like, that's not what I was envisioning for the music. So this really that last part should have been read. But other than that, it was really neat to hear that.
Remind me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I listened to the audiobook, but the music that kicks in there is All Star by Smash Mouth, right?
It is, yeah.
It comes in some, but
It's actually,
right as that last thing,
It's one of their earlier tracks. You might as well be walking on the sun.
I don't think I know another song by them, but I guess you do. So, how interesting that Lewis chooses to do this. And I'm going to read from a couple of different sources that I think, obviously, all of us can make connections to. The first being something I think both of y'all are slightly familiar with, which is the first chapter of the book of Genesis. So
Slightly familiar.
I wanted to pull up here Genesis chapter 1. Obviously, Lewis, as many of us are, would be familiar, but maybe some of our listeners aren't familiar. So the book of Genesis is the very beginning of the Bible. And here are the first 5 verses. I'm actually going to read from the King James Version so we can really get some of the beauty and the prose there. Here's what it says. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, and that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And that's how all of Scripture begins right there. I mean, what connections are y'all already making?
One of the first things that appears for Narnia are the stars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, meaning that there had to have been a darkness that then lets the stars shine.
Yeah, I mean,
So
both are starting out in this.
Right, a contrast of dark and light, day, night.
Yeah. Which and what's interesting too is we think back kind of about Lewis's wanting to pull so much myth into the Narniad is, you know, so many different myths begin with nothingness. And of course that makes sense because creation has to come from somewhere. The idea of creating is that at first something wasn't and then something was. So I'm actually, and I'm sure that maybe there's some out there, but I'm having a hard time thinking about any creation myths just off the top of my head from different world mythologies that don't start with nothingness.
Right.
All the ones I'm thinking of start with at least some sense of a void,
Right.
some sense of nothingness that has to then be created, or there's God, or
One single creator.
There's a single creator, or maybe there's a little bit of a pantheon or something.
Right.
But that creation myths always, and how interesting that so, you know, I got to teach a mythology class to 7th and 8th graders last spring, and so I was doing a lot of research myself for it because it's not something I had like a bunch of training in, just a little bit of a hobby. And going through and reading all these different world mythologies, what was so amazing was how so many different cultures from east to west to the global south all over the world had so many similarities. One of the things my students did is we read a bunch of different ones, like one from Africa, one from North America, one from Europe, one from the Middle East, one from Asia. As we're doing all that, we're pulling apart, and one of them was, you know, the gospel, or not the gospel, but the account in Genesis. And we're pulling all these apart, and we're seeing, wow, what's so great is that kind of this story, and Lewis would probably say it this way, is this story is written on humans' hearts, because this is the actual story. The actual story is that there was a creator who created everything that we see. That's what creation is, right? And everyone has that story written on their hearts, which is why so many different world cultures kind of begin at a similar place. Obviously, there's lots of differences. I'm overgeneralizing here, but we do see that God has written that on our hearts as it's just humans, because it's the truth. We can't really run from it.
Another similarity is the mere earth, rock, and water. There's no tree, no bush, not a blade of grass to be seen. And the way it kind of is an iterative process. It's not everything all at once. He is building different layers at a time, which echoes Genesis.
Yeah. Very much a supposal, because it's not like Aslan is singing Narnia into existence over, you know, these kind of 7 distinct periods, right? Or 6 if you don't count, you know, the rest. But these 6 distinct periods. Instead, we do see this. Well, it's not all happening in the blink of an eye. I mean, some things are, like the stars go from no stars to all stars. You know, hey, all stars.
He finally brought it all together.
Anything else you're thinking of?
No, it just, I think whenever we talk about Genesis, I just always, it's like hearing it again for the first time as a kid. I feel like I still have a lot of the same, I'm still mesmerized by the same things I was as a kid. I still have questions, the same questions I had as a kid. So I love hearing the story of Genesis and then seeing, comparing it to, what they're experiencing here in Narnia for the first time. And we didn't get this far in the reading, but when Cabby says, I'd have been a better man all my life. The Cabby says, I'd have been a better man all my life if I'd known there were things like this.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful self-reflection.
Yeah. See, it's so interesting to think of the fact that we're seeing creation, but there are 5 people there to witness it. I guess 4 humans, a witch, and a horse, right? that are all there witnessing this, and it's unclear exactly what role. I mean, they're not participating, but like, where are they standing if it's a void? Are they just like floating in the sky? Is all this? I mean, who knows? That's not the important part. But you're exactly right. They're seeing this in a very different perspective, and yet what still remains in the same way that creation is, even if you're not a Christian, right? Even if maybe the most like, adamant atheist and believe in just, I don't know, like very kind of all rational scientific ideas of how everything we have came into being, it still is mysterious, right? I mean, I remember having a professor back in college who, learned about the Big Bang and all these things, and was very very, very anti any kind of interpretation of creation, like not old Earth creationism, not young Earth, like anything. It was just the Big Bang. But he spoke still with like, this is insane. Like this,
it's a certain level of wonder to it.
And there has to be, and that's actually still good. I remember like thinking about that and processing that with some of my Christian friends, and just thinking like, wow, like even he still has wonder at the beauty of all that's around us, and that's we can't run away from that. It's like I said earlier, it's written on our hearts, right? And so that the Cabby responds just like, that's so beautiful. Well, I wanted to also, one of the other reasons we wanted to have you on, Emily, is you're kind of this podcast resident Tolkien scholar.
That's hilarious.
Which unfortunately isn't saying much. No offense to you. But we've had you on before. We did our Patreon with the Middle Earth characters we talked about, and I know you're a big fan of the Legendarium. And so we wanted to have you on so we could talk a little bit about Tolkien, and specifically the Ainulindalë, which I'm sure many of our listeners know, but maybe some don't. It's the very beginning of the Silmarillion. It's that first part in the 5 parts that make up the Silmarillion, and the Ainulindalë is the story of the creation of Ea, that's the universe in Tolkien's Legendarium. And I know you've read it before, Emily, but Phil, have you ever read this?
I have not. No.
Okay, well, it's and for any of our listeners who haven't read it, it's pretty short. It's like maybe 6 pages. It's not very long, and it's actually a story that pretty much is very similar to what's happening in Narnia. So much so that if you read The Magician's Nephew first, which came out in 1955, and the Silmarillion was published after Tolkien's death in 1977, you might think, wow, Tolkien really stole this from Lewis, But in fact, as has often been the case, Tolkien had written this many, many decades before. Even the version that is used in the published version of the Silmarillion was written in the 1950s, so actually written around the same time as The Magician's Nephew, but Tolkien had been working on that for decades even earlier. Potentially even back into the early 1930s, maybe even earlier than that. And I want to just give a little spiel for our listeners, and for you too, Phil, that might not be familiar with this. I want to actually read a little. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Ainulindalë and then read from it, because you'll hear some of these similarities, but I actually want us to focus on some of the differences here. So the Ainulindalë, it's Elvish for music of the Ainur, and the way that Tolkien's Legendarium works with creation is that there's the creator, the supreme deity, who's named Eru Iluvatar, and he creates these, we might call them archangels, these beings called the Ainur. And the Ainur are kind of from his thoughts, but they're not his children. In fact, we know specifically that the children are men and elves in Arda, which is kind of the Elvish name for earth. But the Ainur sing along a song with him, and that's how all of Ea, which is again the name for the universe, is created. And I want to read just the first paragraph from the Ainulindalë, and we'll see. We've read from Genesis 1, we've read the creation from Narnia, Magician's Nephew here. Now here is Tolkien. The very first words of the Silmarillion. There was Eru, the One, who in Arda is called Iluvatar. And he first made the Ainur, the holy ones, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but a few together, while the rest hearkened, for each comprehended only that part of the mind of Iluvatar from which he came, and in understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Iluvatar called together all the Ainur and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur. And so they bowed before Iluvatar and were silent. Some pretty big similarities there.
Yeah, that's really fun. So that's in the Silmarillion.
That's in the Silmarillion. And I don't know if I pronounced everybody's name right there, but I mean, you kind of know what you're getting at this point in the podcast.
I remember reading that for the first time and kind of getting 2-3 sentences in and thinking, let me go back and try that again, because I didn't comprehend a lot the first time around.
Yeah, the glossary is very helpful. I use it a lot. Right, you go back. All right, what's this thing again? What's that? Especially because, a little off topic, but in the Silmarillion, everybody has so many names.
Right.
Like you have characters like Turin, who I think in his one chapter has like 6 different names that he gets, and you're like, all right, wait, I got to remember all these. My copy of the Silmarillion, I actually brought it here to the beach. To look over some of the stuff from the Ainulindale, I mean, it's marked up. It looks like a textbook. And it's because I'm like, okay, this is this game character. Who's this? And that way, when I've gone back to reread it, I remember, okay, this is much easier now. Like if I try to read it on my Kindle, I have a really hard time because I don't know who everybody is.
Right.
But again, we see the creation, and it's a little bit more, not a little, it's quite a bit more complicated than Lewis's version. In fact, the creation of the world isn't happening right then. It's just this melody, these harmonies being sung that eventually will lead to the Iluvatar will reveal that all this time they've been singing, they actually have been creating. And now look, here is Arda, here is Aya for everyone to see. But again, it's about song. And so...
Yeah, that's interesting that they pick song. I mean, what is it about music? What is it about voices and song? I think... As humans, I think, not all of us have musical talents or musical gifts, but I think everybody kind of has that. I think part of being human is kind of having this inner desire for beautiful things and beautiful music. And is that supposed to be a sign of worship? I mean, I think the Bible references so much song and music and voices and instruments being a form of worship, and even for people who don't have musical talents, musical gifts. I just think that's interesting that they chose song.
And, in addition to the actual song, there is this, we kind of think of it as this like speaking. Later on in actually in the next chapter, spoiler alert, Phil, Aslan's going to kind of proclaim the start of Narnia in the same way that Eru Iluvatar actually kind of proclaims this is Aya. In the same way that going back to Genesis, God says, he speaks, let there be light, right? And then we know that he also says, it is good, right? And so there is this actual physical speaking of, or this communication of the creation.
Right.
And
that
so
there was nothing, and then there is just spoken something.
And I wonder if I do have one more little piece I want to read in a minute or two, but I do wonder how much of that is, the most beautiful thing that maybe we can create with our voices is song, right? And so wouldn't it make sense that, this is again a supposal, but I wonder if Lewis is even supposing, like maybe the beginning of Genesis is God the Father singing creation into existence, because what's more beautiful than song, right? When you think about the best way to communicate, not best, but the most beautiful way to communicate something could be through the singing something. And so I hadn't thought about that until literally right now, but I wonder if Lewis is supposing that maybe that's how God sang the earth into existence. Right. There's nothing in the Bible that specifically says that.
Well, Iluvatar being, the one being, but then he has, what are they, the extension of his thoughts? Is that what
the Ainur, which is actually
but I think is it his thought? Is that what they said, that were like part of his thoughts?
Yeah, they're like extensions of his thoughts, but they're definitely not the same thing as him.
Right.
Again,
so it's not one. It's not one, and
they're not. It's
not one being with many parts.
No, like Eru Ilúvatar is separate from, they come from his thoughts. And I would think that's more of Tolkien making the distinction that like they're not his children, because that big
'cause the
theme
children
in
will come.
the Silmarillion is the children of Ilúvatar are elves and men, not even dwarves, not even hobbits, right? It's elves and men alone. And I think that Tolkien wants that distinction made from the very beginning of the Silmarillion, that the Ainur who still very much love and serve Eru Ilúvatar in the same way like angels do. Like they're not children of God, right?
And they're also not they're not part of him. They're not part of the Trinity.
Exactly, yeah. So I think it's kind of I think that part's very similar. And I think you get to like these like maybe archangels with the Ainur, and then you have the Maya, like Gandalf obviously was a Maya.
Right.
Are Balrogs also Maya? I think they're also Maya too.
That have kind of gone south.
Yeah. I think I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure a lot of our listeners know. Phil is just staring here like, I need to read this Silmarillion book. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I'm out of my league over here.
It is dense. It is very dense. I would read a chapter and then have to go listen to the Prancing Pony
podcast. Yeah, me too.
And kind of get them to enlighten me a little bit before I moved on.
It is very much worth it though, Phil. I think that, and really for any of our listeners, if this chapter in the Chronicles of Narnia really speaks to you, really moves you, go pick up the Silmarillion, because I think this honestly might be the closest that Lewis's prose ever gets to Tolkien. I don't mean like Tolkien's just so good, this is the closest Lewis ever gets to being that good. I mean, this is maybe the closest that they get to sounding alike. They're both different, talented in different ways, actually talented in a lot of similar ways, but they are writing differently. But it does... a lot of the Silmarillion, even when you get past the Ainulindalin, you get into the Quintus Silmarillion as you're learning about the first age of Middle-earth, it still has a lot of the same feeling of Magician's Nephew here. So if you haven't picked it up, take your time. Take your time, write down all the names, Google stuff a lot, because it's a tough read. It's not easy. It's well worth it. I was telling Anna as we were preparing, I was going back to the Silmarillion, that I do feel like the only book I've ever read, it's the only book I've ever read that feels, again, I don't want this to sound sacrilegious. It feels, I know it's not, but it kind of feels like reading the Bible. Like it's written with that kind of very ancient mythic prose. Maybe not even the Bible. It feels like you're reading a sacred text.
Yeah, I was going to say, meant to be sacred. Right.
And that's part of it because it's supposed to be the history of Middle-earth as told by the elves.
Right.
So it's not just here's Tolkien just telling you what happened. It's as if you're reading what the elves would have. Like this is the elves' own mythology.
Right. That told them of their beginnings.
Exactly. And Tolkien does this. Again, I obviously realize it's not like reading the Bible, but it does have that kind of sacred text that you're reading something written thousands of years ago. I mean, it feels Homeric as well.
Right.
He put so much time and research into the creation of that story. And I think it shows when you can trust that when he's saying something, he actually has all the background thought out. And I think what's special about that is not everybody does that. Some people will just allude to something and that's it. And
like our guy C.S. Lewis right here.
Right.
Yeah. And there are different styles. We need both of them, but it really is a nice benefit. And both of you brought up an interesting reason for like why you're able to enjoy this stuff now is that you have things like the Prancing Pony podcast or the ability to keep track of all the names and characters or look stuff up. I think we're in a really cool time where we are now used to looking things up and keeping track of stuff, and it's another level of enjoyment. You don't have to do that, but it really does make it more enjoyable. And I've learned to read differently for this show, and it's changed how I read everything else as a result.
That really off topic, so you can cut this out if you need to, but we were talking about in a recent professional development of like, how when do kids stop learning how to read? Maybe in kindergarten through second grade, you're taught how to read. And then from third grade, through fifth grade, maybe that's when you're reading to learn is kind of the phrase you always hear. But then from, fifth, sixth grade on, you just know how to read. But that's so not true. I mean, we go to collegiate courses where they have to reteach you how to read texts, how to pull out information, and that, things like Narnia and the Silmarillion, I had to be retaught how to read a text like that because there's so much information you can pull out of it.
Yeah, I had to have someone sit down and explain to me. This is a senior year of high school. I I had not learned the next level like you're referring to of how to get the content out and how to actually study that content so that you have to like rephrase it in your head every step of the way to make sure you really understand it.
Right, right. You're still learning how to read at every stage of life.
Yeah.
But,
Well, kind of to wrap up, this has been a great discussion. To wrap up kind of this, looking at the book of Genesis, looking at Tolkien, and then kind of comparing all this to Lewis here, I wanted to read just one paragraph here that I actually found on a little place called the Internet. Was doing a little bit of research there because I didn't bring any of my books with me here to the beach. And I actually came across a really interesting blog. It's called the Voyage Blog, and it's a Roman Catholic website. And it was written by a guy named Thomas Salerno, and he was looking at the creation myths of both Narnia and Middle-earth. And he wrote this great little blog post, which I will put in the description for this episode, but I wanted to read just one paragraph from it because I thought it was so insightful here. Here's what he wrote. Salerno writes that both Middle-earth and Narnia were brought into being through music, an act of speech, is likely no coincidence. Tolkien and Lewis would have been intimately familiar with sacred scripture. In Genesis 1, God speaks creation into existence from nothing. In the prologue to his gospel, St. John identifies Jesus Christ as the Word of God through which the universe was created. Then he quotes from John 1, verses 1 through 3, which say, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made." Then he goes on to write this final sentence here. The fictional creation myths of Tolkien and Lewis teach us that the Word which brought forth the universe is a thing of unimaginable beauty, like a great and mighty symphony. So really similar to what we've kind of been saying. I just thought that sums up our thoughts so well of what a great way to envision that beauty, right?
An experience that beauty.
Well, Phil, we have more. Sorry, Emily, for you, but we have more of this discussion to be had in the next chapter too, because obviously this chapter does not end. The song's not over when the chapter ends. It's actually about to change. But before we do that, we should actually finish up the very last page or two here. Phil, what happens at the end of this chapter?
a lion appears, and Uncle Andrew mentions that he wishes he had a gun and he wants to shoot the lion.
Yikes.
And that seems like a terrible idea. And the cabin wants to continue listening to the music, but the music has changed.
And in that exchange, right before we learn that the music is exchanged, it's interesting the way that Aslan is first introduced to us. It just says it was a lion. Huge, shaggy, and bright, it stood facing the risen sun. Its mouth was wide open in song, and it was about 300 yards away. Now, lion is capitalized here, as it often is done with Aslan.
Even using the indefinite article.
That's true.
Capitalized. It's not the lion, it's a lion.
Exactly. And we get really nothing else. Very interesting here that we don't get, so it's very much from the perspective of the humans watching, like, oh, it's just a lion. And something does tell them that this is not just any lion, but they have no idea who Aslan is. They don't know anything else other than, wow, this is just, this is something that stands apart, right? Something that's set apart. It makes sense that Andrew is terrified, wants to shoot it. The witch seems to be, throughout this whole chapter, the only one who's reacting with, like, the strongest to all of this, almost as if she really understands the majesty of this power more than anyone else. In a similar way that, like in the Screw Tape Letters, the demons actually, as much as they hate God, they actually seem to understand God more than some of the humans do. Like, they understand his power, right? They don't have respect for it, but they know that God is powerful more than we sometimes do as humans, right? The witch kind of feels the same way. And then all of this, like you said, concludes with Diggory and Polly saying, hey, like, they're kind of threatening, like, we'll just leave all of y'all here. Sorry, Mr. Cabby, sir. We feel really bad for you, but we're going to leave y'all here if we have to.
The horse seems fine, so it's okay if we leave him.
And the horse is fine back in the woods. I don't know
seems
if the horse,
great.
Yeah, you think it's all right?
Yeah, he's fine.
There's just dirt there. There's nothing for him to eat yet. But maybe he can.
But it's coming.
Yeah. So any other final thoughts here before we go on to some listener feedback?
I think it's interesting that when they're describing the lion that he's facing the risen sun. It just kind of reminds me of the sacredness that a lot of cultures have of facing the east, being buried facing the east. That again, that maybe there's some holiness to that you're facing a risen sun. Again, I just think it adds to his description of his holiness.
Well, and very
power.
much Lewis pulling from different mythologies, different cultures, and a lot of this. And it's one of those things where, when we pause to think about it, like you just did, we go, oh yeah, like that's something. But when we just read it quickly, it something inside of us, if hope, if we're well read, as Lewis keeps reminding us we need to be, we do just, it does again, just it kind of something clicks in our brain, even subconsciously, of, oh, this is something special, something
just adds
holy,
a little
something
bit more.
set apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, next time, Emily, unfortunately, you're not going to be with us, so you'll have to actually read the book on your own to find out what happens next. But in the next chapter, chapter 9, it's actually entitled The Founding of Narnia, and in that chapter, Narnia continues to be sung into existence by Aslan himself. And so, Phil, that's what we're going to be getting to next time. But before we go, we do have some listener feedback that we've got to get to, and we're going to let Emily get a little bit of a say here as well, too, as we read through this.
Okay.
Do you have that email for us? I think it's the email that we're going to do is from Natalie today.
I do. I have it right here. Natalie says, "Hello, Phil and Daniel. I'm a longtime listener of the show. I believe I've been listening to this podcast since the second or third episode of the first season. I love the Chronicles of Narnia, and thanks to this podcast, have found even more ways to enjoy the wonderful world. These ways include Michael Ward's books Planet Narnia and the Narnia Code and Into the Lantern Waste music album by Sarah Sparks. The main reason I'm writing is in response to a discussion about Narnia being a country and or a world from Season 6, The Magician's Nephew. Episode 2, Chapter 2, Diggory and His Uncle. As I was listening to this discussion, I immediately thought of Australia. This might not be the strongest analogy, but I think it helps explain this interesting relationship. Australia is both a continent and a country. So when people say Australia, they could be referring to the country of Australia or any other islands that are part of the continent of Australia. Based on this analogy, the same would be true for Narnia. When characters, or readers, say Narnia, they could be referring to Narnia, the country where animals talk, and Peter is the High King, or they could be referring to the world of Narnia, where the countries of Calormian and Telemar reside. Based on context, characters and readers are able to determine if Narnia is being referred to as the country or the world. Thank you so much for giving me a fun place to enjoy the Chronicles of Narnia. Further up and further in, Natalie."
Thank you, Natalie. Great email here. I thought it was great to read this one on the show today, knowing that we were going to have a lot of talk about worlds and creation and all these things. What do y'all think about this, about Natalie's idea here?
I love that this brought back a really kind of cute memory for me. My students in third grade, they have this big country project at the end of the year where they get to pick a country and then do all this research and kind of put together this cool project at the end. But on their research paper where they kind of gather all their information, they have to list a couple of facts, and, it says country. And then the next one is continent your country is on. And I had a little girl who picked Australia, and she said, "Can I just skip this one? Because I don't want to write it again." And she thought she was so cool because she didn't have to write it twice because it's the same thing.
Did you assign the kids the countries?
I did not. They got to pick. They get to pick. Yeah. We recommend they try not to pick countries that are so small that there's not going to be a lot of information. Don't pick the Marshall Islands because you're not going to have that much information on them. But they get.
No offense to our listeners in the Marshall Islands.
Yeah, that was always just my example. Where it's like you just might not get that much information on it.
Yeah. Like I picked Easter Island, and that's actually you'd get a ton because of the statues. Actually, I bet that's actually different. No, that's cool. That's well set. So you're on board. This is a great way to think of Narnia.
Yeah, I love that it can be two things at once, but also two separate things. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point. What do you think, Dana?
No, I agree. I think that context is important. There's only been maybe once or twice that we've, through the history of this show, gotten confused as to what Lewis or the narrator is referring to when he says Narnia. For the most part, you always can tell what is meant, like especially in like Dawn Treader when they're sailing and they've left Narnia, but obviously they haven't left the world of Narnia, but they've left the land of Narnia. It's always clear what they mean. So I like this idea. I can't believe we hadn't thought about this before. So thank you, Natalie, for bringing it up. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense the same way that we all, if we're talking about Australia, I might, mention other like small, like,
Right.
those small islands that are around it. You can probably tell if I'm like talking
Right.
about the outback.
Right.
You're not like, you mean like New Zealand?
Where does New Zealand go?
They mean
I
your
think-
car.
If you say, what continent is New Zealand on?
I kind of loop it in with Australia.
I do
but
too, with like
love-
Oceania.
like Oceania kind of, but like
But I don't know.
do our New Zealand, like, is that really
New Zealand.
offensive to
What
our New
continent are
Zealand
you on?
listeners? Yeah. Hey, and I know we have quite a few
Yeah.
listeners in New Zealand. Where do you live?
Here's my question.
And it's
If
wait,
you-
just let me just say this to them. It's not your fault that the education system failed us. Like us not knowing where you live is not your fault. It's our fault. Okay? Don't be offended. What are you gonna say, Phil?
My question is for our UK listeners. If you drop the word "the" and you say you're in hospital instead of in the hospital, and then you say you're in country instead of in the country, do you also say you're in continent?
Say that again? One more time.
He's saying, or do you say you're incontinent? Did you make this up right now, or has this been one that's just been in your back pocket forever?
I've been waiting a long time for this. No, my real question is, do you know which
Muffin
continent
Man.
used to be called Australia?
No, I don't know this. I would have guessed Australia, but obviously that's not the case.
I think I may have brought this up before, but maybe it got trimmed out. Or maybe it was on the dancing lawn. But Antarctica used to be called Australia. And Australia used to be called New Holland. And then New Holland
did know
said,
that.
we're called Australia. And Antarctica said, we don't have any people here to defend our name. So,
So who's talking? Who's even talking?
right?
The penguins.
Yeah, the penguins are like, wait a second, this is not right. There's no polar bears there. That's just the North Pole.
Yeah, polar
right?
bears in the North Pole. Penguins are not in the North Pole.
Yeah, so it's polar bears up top.
Yeah.
I know that's not how actual geography works.
Right.
And penguins on the bottom.
I know.
Again,
we do a lot of
not-
penguin talk too in third grade because
Yeah.
we read Mr. Popper's Penguins.
Mr. Popper's Penguins. I saw, we're here at the end of the episode. Why not? I saw Mr. Popper's Penguins, the Jim Carrey movie, in theaters. I paid $12 to see it in like
Thoughts?
2011 or 2010.
Thoughts?
It was fine.
That's how I feel about
it's
the
like-
book too. The book is fine.
I don't love the book.
It's not the best book in the world.
But I find Jim Carrey to be, I know he's not for everybody. I find him to be charming, or at least entertaining in everything that he's in, even if he's not charming himself in the film. It was fine,
I took a kid on a field trip once to go see a theatrical version of Mr. Popper's Penguins, and
Really?
we
Like
come
a bunch
back.
of kids?
We come back on the bus, and I said, "Well, what'd you think?" He said, "I didn't like it." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "I thought they were gonna have real penguins." But it
Because
was
they
like
CG'd the penguins.
no, it was people. They were little puppets. It was like a theater, like
Oh,
a play.
you didn't go to see the actual movie.
Yeah, no, we went to a play, and
See,
they were just actual
again,
puppets.
Another time where context matters. I thought you meant theater, like
Oh, I meant like
movie
we went to a
theater.
theater
You
and
meant-
watched some people
You
on
went
the
to like
stage.
a
And they were,
theater.
I mean, they were just puppets.
Theater
and-
versus theater.
right.
Theater versus
And he was
theater.
mad. They weren't real
She went to the
penguins.
cinema.
Yes. I would be kind of bummed by that too. Well, any other thoughts here before we wrap up this show? I take the silence as a deafening yes, we're all done. Emily wants to go back to the beach or pool. This episode is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can listen to a bonus episode each month along with other rewards. As always, special thanks goes out to Hannah Anderson, John Marr, Emily, and Ryan Smith for supporting us at our top tiers. If you have any listener feedback, you can email us at the Narnia podcast at gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail at 406-646-6733. As always, we appreciate a review over on Apple Podcasts because that helps other listeners find our show and join along with the read-through. Thank you again for coming on this journey with us. We'll be back next time with Chapter 9.